Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 11, the penultimate round of Season 10 in the Case King Pro Series Championship. We are at Silverstone Race Circuit, and thank you everybody for your patience. It's been a little bit of a technical nightmare, not for the first time this season, unfortunately, trying to get things set up for this evening, but I think we are just about ready to dive in to this evening's action. But last week, just as a little bit of a roundup for those that may not have seen it, we were at the Nürburgring, and what a fantastic race we were treated to. We had Grantis Correcas taking forth the victory of the season, and it was just such another masterclass bit of driving from that young man. The Lithuanian managing to outclass Jade Hutchinson in second place in that Lamborghini. Not a strong performance from him. And then Marco Bischoff rounding out the podium positions. And an excellent performance and a very pivotal one potentially in terms of the championship as well. Nicholas Huben did return to the track, but with only 2 races left on the calendar and with Grantis' very, very consistent fine form is becoming ever more difficult for Nicholas Huben to look to close out a championship, which he looked for so long to have a very firm grasp on, but Grantis Correcas has been absolutely faultless for this season and has been in such stellar form. But I said we were going over to Silverstone Race Circuit. Of course, this is my home circuit and actually in fairly close proximity to me nowadays. And there's 18 turns of pure motorsport, legendary glory and history through Copse Corner into Maggots and Beckett's and out of Chapel. Of course, the old style start-finish line for this one, rather than what the likes of Formula 1 uses nowadays. Down in towards Stowe Corner before going through Vale and out of Club down the Hamilton Straight past the very nice looking wing building in towards Abbey Curve, have a little incline through there, in towards Farm, hard on the brakes into Village Corner, overtaking opportunity actually into the loop there of turn 14 where you carry that momentum out of Village and try to catch your opponent off by surprise. Through entry down into Brooklands and through Luffield, a fantastic series of corners to then close out a lap at Woodcote and put together a lovely, lovely bit of driving glory. And for these GT3 cars, they might not have quite the sort of weapon-like downforce of Formula 1 cars, but I tell you what, you hook a lap up around here and you are guaranteed to be grinning from ear to ear in the cockpit of your car. There is absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. As we are a little bit behind the schedule relative to normal running, server is up, so we shall be making our way over to that in just a moment, as drivers have a few minutes of practice left to go to get their setups dialed in, ready for qualifying, followed by 60 minutes of driving goodness. And we talked about it before, qualifying, you can take a couple, practice, you can take a couple of different approaches. You can either look to try to get your setup dialed in for qualifying, try to maximize your 1 lap pace as best as you can, or you can look to really turn your attention and focus towards trying to nail that race pace. Of course, an hour-long race in the world of GT, maybe not the greatest of distances for drivers to try to tackle. Of course, we only recently had the 24 hours of Le Mans, so an hour of racing seems a little bit on the small side by comparison, but admittedly when these guys are going at it hammer and tong as they always do in the Pro Series, they need their race pace to be absolutely on top A-grade form if they are to have a chance of taking victory in this star-studded lineup. And some fantastic drivers we have in the for this evening, as we always are treated to for this championship. Just getting the last pieces of the overlay sorted, and then we can have a look like so. So currently looking at Pogorelov in the Ferrari 296. See how they get on their lap, and we'll get an onboard from somebody very shortly. In actual fact, and of course that is starting that for this one, so we shall in fact go on board with Alexander, presuming that he doesn't fail me on occasion. We do sometimes go for an onboard and they immediately retire the lap. How my commentator cursed it for myself? Yes, I have. Fantastic. I'm glad to see that I'm on fine form for this evening. I better make sure I stay away from saying too much in the race, otherwise I shall, well, have to buy a lottery ticket at some point. So we'll have a look in the meantime, as I just have noticed a little bit of a perplexing issue with the overlay, as for some reason half the names are cutting off. Well, that's interesting, not something that I've come across before. I think I know the reason though, and just like that, magic, everything is fine. We've got, of course, fan favourite Jade AC in the pits at the moment. Also the likes of this man, Morris Lerner, who joined us for the first time last week, has been getting himself dialed in to ACC very recently and already showing some exceptional levels of pace and getting very, very good behind the wheel of that Lamborghini. Of course, this season we've had everything kind of thrown around a little bit and trying to kind of establish a bit of a status quo in terms of understanding where the performance of these cars lies. Where we've got the 296, the 992, the Lamborghini Evo 2, we've even got the new McLaren as well. Not quite featuring in this field as of yet, unfortunately, of course, because those drivers have managed to select their car at the beginning of the season, commit to that throughout, and of course there wasn't too many choosing a McLaren at that point in time. But I have no shadow of a doubt that when we get into Season 11, that McLaren is definitely going to be featuring in the field. I would almost be willing to put money on it. Keyword being almost. I won't have put myself into too much of a betting position. So we'll see if we can grab an onboard from someone starting a lap in just a moment. Waltzing on right now for Visceral Esports in that 296. Purple in sectors 1 and 2, and already continuing to find time as he continues to get to grips with that car. Soltov as well, actually. Big improvement with him right now. A second up on his lap time. Of course, waiting to see exactly what sort of pace some of these drivers have. And I think, if I can find him on the leaderboard, Garantus Correcus is the car just behind him. No, he's not. So is that Luke Whitehead in the field then? In the other Veloce Esports Porsche. Can't see him in the lineup. That would be Angel Nostroza. That's why. There he is, Angel Nostroza. Let's go on board this man. The man from Chile in the number 11 car. And we even get to see in pursuit, not for very long, of Soltov through Cop's corner. Then big amounts of commitment through that part of the lap. And then in towards Magnus and Beckett, throwing it through that first kink and immediately bailing out of the lap. So, again, I just don't think the drivers want us to see an onboard of Silverstone. Well, they've got 60 minutes of racing, so at some point, one of them will have to allow us to see the man of this race circuit. And if we're lucky, we should in fact be able to see it during this qualifying session. I've already seen some people in chat supporting this man, Timo Karppinen for Griphacks Engineering, who of course took a victory earlier on this season and has been looking very, very good in that Lamborghini, and a very nice livery on board that car as well. Very clean livery. We sometimes, we see sort of two different art styles when it comes to liveries in sim racing. You either have the very big and bold, maybe not something you'd be typically seen in the real world, or you go for those that really go for that sort of very nice professional looking clean livery that you can very easily see featuring in real life. And I have to say, that Griphacks Engineering car definitely fits the bill of the latter, so very nice stuff. But we will stick with Timo for now and then go on board with him for a lap. Let's hope anyway. Third time lucky, as he starts to get those tyres up to temperature. You see Nicholas Huben in that Unicorns of Love Mercedes. Man has been so consistent. He has had one no-show, which is why, in terms of the championship standings, he's a little bit out of position relative to where we would kind of expect him to be based upon the performance that he has had. But remember, we do have drop scores, 2 drop scores, in fact, for this championship. So right now, while he is about 800 points behind, he did miss out on, typically, when you consider his average, he's been scoring around the likes, 1,200 points behind, and he's been scoring around 1,200 to 1,300 points per race. So, he's definitely there or thereabouts, but with 4 victories to Karakis' name, those drop scores, they are going to work very much in favour of the Lithuanian, I think, at this point in time. So, let's try for an onboard with Timo. Hopefully he does not let us down with this one. So going down towards Cops for the very first time in qualifying, then trying to use all of that curb on the entry, tucking away into the apex early on the power as you dare run it over that exit curb. Not too wide though, otherwise you will lose both a little bit of drive and crucially invalid overlap. Now in towards Magnussen. Beckett flick it through these first couple of times. A little bit of a blend of the throttle, trying to get the nose in towards Beckett for the second part of this winding series of curves on the power. A little kick of oversteer, couple of corrections and a little dip in the wheel of the grass through into Chapel Curve before heading under the bridge down the hangar straight over to the left hand side of the circuit, trying to spot your braking point for Stowe Corner, right around the entry curve there on the left hand side, clipping that inside apex again. Run it as wide as you can, easy to get track limit warnings on the exit then, and then hard on the brakes to head down in towards the Vale chicane. Gotta be careful of that sausage curb on the inside apex. Bit of a tricky traction zone for the Lamborghini there, kicking up a little bit of a fuss, but the TC doing a pretty good job, and the man behind the wheels having good reactions to bring that one all together. Now spot your entry in towards Abbey Curve, down into fourth, back into fifth, trying to get the engine braking, do a little bit of rotation for you, and then back across to the left hand side of the circuit, hard on the brakes, and then clipping the inside apex of Village. Say overtaking opportunity, spring one up the inside in towards the loop there, but a little bit of a wider line to maximize this exit for the Lamborghini. Through in towards Aintree now, carrying that speed. Only a couple of corners left to go under the bridge once more. And Brooklands have to be patient with this one. The apex is later than you think, and they're clipping it nicely. A little bit of a hop over the AstroTurf on the inside. Double apex approach, so take that inside part to start with and then squeeze the power on as you come back at the apex for the second time. Running out onto the exit curve through in towards Woodcut to round out the lap for the number 5 Guardians. He crosses the line. It's a 157.155. We'll have to see how that stands in this field. Clifford almost a second down. Timo Walsingham, though, displacing Timo by about a tenth and a half. Almost into the 56s on his very first attempt, as then more drivers start to make their way through. Nicholas Huben is a little bit away from completing his lap. Marco Bischoff, a man that has run very well, still not quite in towards the 56s, but 5 thousandths of a second clear of the Ferrari driver. And I'm expecting the Ferrari to be a little bit more on pace this evening. We'll have to see how it plays out, but their high-speed cornering capabilities typically lend themselves to this circuit, and of course there isn't too much in the way of curbs for them to negotiate. Porsche, exceptional rotation and high-speed stuff as well, and very good at getting the power down out of the likes of the chicane, out of Vale, out of Luffield as well. That's where those cars are going to make up their time, but I think the Ferrari might be in with a little bit more of a shout than we saw at the likes of Nürburgring. Let's see if we can grab... where is he on my board? Nicholas Huben once again starting to come in towards Abbey Curve now. That was very, very close to the outside portion of the track, but the German driver gets it nicely, whipped back across to open up the second part of that very fast-flowing chicane. And then using all of that Mercedes V8 grunt under the bonnet to absolutely thunder his way down the back straight. If anybody was following the action of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, there was a bit of a fan favourite going around the circuit. The NASCAR, of course, I think run by Jenson Button, Mike Rockefeller, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then Jimmy Johnson, of course, renowned NASCAR driver, and that absolutely roared its way around. There was definitely one that people were enjoying seeing. Mercedes, though, up towards P7 for the number 4 car. Meanwhile, Timo has reclaimed that top spot and is the first driver. Oh dear, that's a rather big flick of the wheel and a chunk of damage and a bit of a facial rework on the front of that Mercedes. Timo has gone into the 56s, and whilst Bischoff isn't improving, one man that is Mattia De Campo, the Italian for Suzuki GT Omega. Currently sitting P4, make that P5, with Jardier splitting the 2 Ferraris. And Mattia has shown some very good pace at times. He hasn't had the best of luck in race pace, and I think, if I recall correctly, maybe a couple of small questionable moments at Bathurst, which I think, if I remember rightly on Twitter, he was slightly regretful of. But you live and you learn. That is all about the world of sim racing. And now finds himself once again competing at the very tippy top of ACC drivers and currently trying to move his way up the field. We've also got Sosnev in the number 28 car. So good stuff for him for Warhammer Racing in 5th place. And again, for those that maybe are unfamiliar with the LFM platform and system, that the number on your car correlates to your relative elo or skill rating effectively in the lobby. So if you see a high numbered car in a very low numbered position, then they're doing a very good job. And Massive De Campo improving to a 57.2 as he looks to continue to extract pace out of that Ferrari. Of course, we see drivers go for a little bit more of a long run in qualifying now. Ever since update 1.9, to get a lovely view of that 296 really throwing the weight around from side to side, as De Campo tries to get the power down and the rotation. Again, little clip of the grass end as he really tries to maximise his exit speed down towards Stowe Corner. But we are seeing drivers take a bit more time to get their tyres up to temperature. Since that update, they don't fire up quite as quickly. So, we quite often we would see drivers put in their last attempt with, in this case, it'd be about 2 minutes left on the clock. They'd leave the pit lane, go out, do their warm-up lap, and then straight onto a fast one. And that would be the best lap that they would produce. Now it's not quite so simple. Now you really actually have to understand the warm-up cycle of these tyres and try to take care of them, get themselves into the right window when you need them, because they don't quite have the same sort of fire-up like nature that they used to. They don't quite come up to temperature as quick as drivers may like. Same for pressures as well in that regard. De Campo, though, definitely has got himself into a pretty nice window of performance. It seems he was briefly 2/10 up, now back down to a 10th. Meanwhile, also Maurice Lerner has got up into P4 for the Lamborghini, but so his Lamborghini's 1 and 4 at the moment. De Campo carrying a little bit too much speed in towards Brooklands. I think got a bit enthusiastic. He's managed to pull it back a little bit. He's carried good momentum by the looks of it out of Luffield, so he has rescued the lap for an improvement. I think very short line to the finish. It's good enough to get within 2/10 of Carpenter and go P6. But I think there's a little bit more in that lap, as that final sector was far from ideal for the Italian driver. Someone else that's improving at the moment is Sasha Vassner in that low-fuel motorsport Mercedes car, as Giardia brings out the yellow flag over by Beckett. So I'm not sure if he was on a flyer and made a bit of a mistake, or if he just left the pits and decided that he wanted to have another crack. I didn't quite see whereabouts he was in terms of positioning, but we'll stay on board with Vassar for now. And he has dropped that time. He had 2/10 a moment ago, but through the loop and Aintree, difficult section for this Mercedes. Doesn't quite have the agility they would want, and he has in fact backed out of the lap, and he's trying to set up the exit as best as he can now to start another one in just a second. Michael Frey, though, is just behind the Swiss driver for No Name Motorsport in the number 24 car. Trying to see what he can do in this Porsche 992 with that flat six roaring in the boot, and as he hits the timing beam, it is an improvement. Oh, it's up to a 57.587, but not quite good enough to move up any position. Sasha Vassner already finding time on his lap in the opening sector, as are a couple of other drivers further down the field. I'll tell you what, though, also just as a quick note, Grantis Crackers only good enough for P5 right now. Not quite the sort of stellar qualifying pace that we are used to seeing from this man, but still 4 minutes on the clock. But really, he will only get, oh, it'd be close. He might get 2 goes at this. He might just about leave on time, but it depends whenabouts he gets out of the pits. I think he's only going to realistically get 1 flyer out of this. So it's going to be very marginal. He may have timed it to perfection. He's obviously a lot smarter, a lot quicker than I am, so I won't judge too quickly. And Walsingham, though, trying to improve, and he has found a 10th so far, and that would be good enough to snatch that provisional pole position spot through in towards Abbey Curve, now down towards Village Corner, hard on the brakes. Trying to get that cart turned in nicely. He opens up the exit, and that looks like a very nice line through the loop there on the power once more, and he's carried good momentum in towards Aintree, so that looked like a very, very pixel perfect sort of section. Getting a fairly nice toe. Not too far away, not too close for that ET Sports BMW, punching a very big hole in the air. Also, look at Pogorelov, 4 tenths up in P11, so I have to keep an eye on Alexander down in the 23 car. That'd be a stellar lap time if he can pull it off. It does look like he's lost a little bit of ground in the mid part of the lap, but I'll tell you what, Walsingham now trying to round out a lap. It's going to be a good one as he heads towards the timing beam, and it's going to be a 56.822. Very nicely done. And I'll tell you what, though, he is not done yet. He wants to try to see if he can find some extra time. What about the likes of Pogorelov? It's not the best effort he could have done. It's still going to be a good improvement, though, up in towards P6 for the number 23 car. I did also briefly see the likes of Lerner going purple, but I think that may have been the timing beam getting a little bit on the confused side. As Marco Bischoff, actually, he's found a 10th as he comes into the closing stages of the lap. Down in towards Brooklands curve now, using all of the curb on the entry. Only a few millimeters on the far right side of that tyre wall. And you can get away with it predominantly with these cars because they have a little bit of a softer suspension and also, of course, the ABS as well relative to likes of Formula 1, so they can open up that line a bit more. But for Bischoff, it's half a tenth away for Walsingham. Walsingham, though, is not improving, but just trying to see, he should get one more lap in after this, so not all is lost, but it won't be any better than P2 for Bischoff. He went purple in that middle sector, but there will be nothing more for the two-time Pro Series champion. And suggestion in chat that the Lamborghini should get a buffer around Silverstone. Now, I haven't driven any of these cars. In actual fact, I haven't driven on ACC in quite a while generally. We do have Lamborghinis P3 and 4, so they are seemingly up there or thereabouts, but they could be perhaps a little bit lackluster on pace. It'd be interesting to see what some of the rest of you in the chat think about that one. Few more cars coming out into the pits, so Pogorelov, I think, being one of them. So it was a good effort to get up into that top 10 spot. Almost into top 5, but it won't be anything better. Walsingham, having just started a lap, Lerner is going to get another one after this, should he wish to choose it, and it is pretty close. It's going to be a very small improvement, only 13 thousandths knocked off his previous lap times. He'll go again and see what he can do. Grantis Korekas as well, he was around a tenth of a second up, but couldn't quite put it together. And down in towards Brooklands curve. And let's see, through Luffield then, trying to get the power down in the 992. Traction for the Lithuanian, very much in his favour. Look at Walsingham, 10th of a second up. Oh, look at the tight line that Korekas took there to the line, and it worked for him in the end. Managed to get up into P4. He won't be the lead Porsche, and he might be a little bit disappointed by that. Of course, a long race to go, but other drivers are improving. Inestrosa, his teammate, is one of them. And then trying to see what he can do in the number 11 car, Moritz Lerner, and Walsingham finding time as well in the closing stages. So is Jardier and Strozer up towards P5, just behind his teammate there, 2 thousandths ahead of this man, Moritz Lerner, who still has a little bit of time in his lap. He may be able to find Walsingham. For a second there was 3 tenths of a second up. But he did sacrifice, by the looks of it, a bit of exit speed because he has dropped 2 out of those 3, but it is still an improvement for the British driver who's just trying to see if he can cement this pole position that little bit more. He's been in very strong points in this season so far. He was having a fantastic battle with George Boothby at Watkins Glen, I believe, where it was Boothby that came out on top. Maybe this will be Walsingham's day, and in qualifying, Drummy certainly looking good to do something about it. That's a 56.6. And he absolutely smashes the rest of the field, quarter of a second ahead of anybody else. Moritz Lerner, don't think is going to improve as he rounds out his lap as well. And he doesn't. He only needed a couple of thousandths to move up a position, but he can't find them. What about De Campo? So close. 15 thousandths of a second behind Pogorelov in the end. And just a couple more cars out on circuit. The 24 will be the last of them. 22 of Fideli as well. Coming out of the final corner then is the Swiss driver. We'll see as he hits the timing beam what he is able to do then, and he stays in P20. And having looked back at the chat, I must admit I was marginally suspicious of the comment, seeing as the Lamborghini was fairly high up the order. But I'd have to say that we've got the likes of the Ferraris, the Porsche, the Lamborghinis, in quite a nice mix up there. It's a shame we don't have some more of the other manufacturers stacked inside of that top 10. I'm usually just trying to find Nicholas Huben. Whereabouts is the Unicorns of Love Drive? Down in 15th place. So whilst Grantis Correcus may not have had an ideal qualifying, as far as Nicholas Huben goes, really the only man that can challenge Correcus in terms of the championship, that is a little bit of a disaster for the German driver. So not what he would have wanted whatsoever. So we'll have to see whether or not he is able to improve his position to win the race. Of course, fantastic racecraft for that man, but he's got a lot of work to do if he does want to try to find a contending spot, trying to see if he can reclaim some of those points, because really he hasn't taken a race victory all season, and that's fundamentally what he needs. But I tell you what, someone who is feeling, I think, very, very good with that qualifying, Aidan Walsingham, quarter of a second clear of the rest of the field. He must be feeling confident going into this race. Timo Karppinen lines up in P3, just behind Marco Bischoff, who completes that front row. And then Grantis Correcus, your championship leader, the number one man in the server and on the LFM platform, starts in P4, with Angel Innestroza, his teammate, starting in P5. Good qualifying from the two Veloce Esports drivers. And as far as George's whereabouts, I do not know, unfortunately. So it's a shame we don't have him here tonight. Moritz Lerner, again, great performance from him, considering he is still very much getting familiar with this platform. Starts P6 with Pogarello. Fantastic stuff from him in the number 23 card. Starts in P7, just ahead of this man, Mattia De Campo. Couldn't quite find the pace at the end of that session, but the number 8 car starting in P8. Jaya then starts in P9, and rounding out top 10, the teammate of Marco Bischoff, K. Kramer Racing Esports car, the number 10 in 10th place of Noah Eder. Philip Gross starts in P11. In the next of the Lamborghinis, followed up by Antonio Fedeli, the Italian, driving the nation's... Well, I'll leave those Italians in the chat to describe whether or not it's their favourite manufacturer from their country, or maybe second favourite. I think that's a debate for a whole nother time. Solsev starts in P13 with Sasha Vasta in P14. Nicholas Huben down in P15. Not even the lead Mercedes. And that was not to take anything away from Sasha Vasta, of course, very talented driver and had some exceptional results in the past, but it's just not a position we would have expected to see that Unicorns of Lava car. Zehanaya is in P16 with Thomas Brandt in P17. Good stuff from him. Has had quite a little bit of support over recent races, and I think possibly his personal best qualifying position over the last few races as well. So good stuff from him. Simonol starts 18th with Clifford in 19th, and then Michael Frey in the last of the top 20 positions. And I've already initiated the debate in the chat, and I shall say nothing further on the matter. Batball Fuchs starts at 21st. Jan Drexler starts in 22nd place, with Konstantin Solstov starting in 23rd for the BMW. And then it is Nico Pennon starting in 24th position in the number 14 car. Eric Conrad, as we get a little bit of a fleet of BMWs at this end of the grid, starts in 25th place. And then Pierre Meyer, the number 25 car, almost starting on his number, starts in 26th. Benny Vitter does get the combination correct. I think it might be almost the most amount of these that we've had where the number plate matches the position, as he starts in 27th, and rounding out the grid is Dan Edvardson. So great stuff from all of our lineups. Everybody starts to get underway then for this race. Get those tyres dialed in one last time then, and see what they can do around this circuit. You can see it looks like, at least for the time being, the rather reflective of the current weather in the UK. that it is pretty warm and toasty. For those that are maybe in hotter countries, you may laugh at us, but we do tend to suffer a little bit. Why is Korekis in the pits? Has Nicholas Huben been gifted a golden opportunity? Hopefully Korekis will be able to get going again, but he either... I can only imagine, well, the only way that you start in the pits like that is if you don't go to grid before the timer runs out. So whether or not that was a mistake or a purposeful decision for some sort of technical error or hardware issue, I'm not sure. But in one form or another, that is a terrible, terrible way for Korekis to start his race. And how he has been so consistent every race of the season. And this is certainly going to be one of those results that ends up managing to compromise his championship race. And yes, already suggestions in the chat. He's going for a last to first challenge. Well, I have to say, if he does do that, I don't think anyone would be able to dispute how much he deserves this championship. He's been a top contender for the last couple of seasons. He didn't take a race win until this season. Now he's got 4 in 10 races. Excuse me, actually, let me just revise that statistic to double check. And he has... No, that was right. He has 4 victories so far. No, excuse me, I was right to change it. I missed the way the numbers come together at the beginning of the table. No, he has a 50% win rate from this championship because he won in week 1, week 3, week 6, week 9, and week 10. And he has been in absolutely stellar form. But this is going to be a little bit tricky. And yeah, whether or not, whatever the reasons are for Korekis starting from the pit lane, I can only imagine that there was some sort of mistake or issue there. Hopefully, if it was a hardware issue of sorts, that it will be sorted and he'll be able to make his way up through the field, I'm sure. It's going to be tricky, but if anyone can do it, he is one of the few in this grid that will have the pace. And also considering he has banked in so many good results this season, he's not really had a bad race so far. He had one issue at Suzuka where he did end up getting himself a penalty that dropped him down the order a little bit. But other than that, his season has been pretty good. And so he hasn't really got a great deal to lose at this point. Of course he wants to score well, but with Huben down in P15 anyway, likely a score that would also end up filling out a drop score for the Unicorns that love Mercedes. Granted, Korekis can very likely just look to have an exciting evening of racing. Hopefully once he closes up to the back of this pack, which I imagine he will very much look to do. But then rounding out of the final corner then, Walsingham to lead them down towards turn 1, joined on the front row by a man who has won this race before, Marco Bischoff, and then Teemu Karppinen in that Grippax Engineering Lamborghini lurking just behind, a little bit of a gap to the likes of Lerner and Inestrosa. But for 60 minutes of Silverstone then here in Season 10 of the Pro Series for round 11, waiting for the number 6 car to slam the loud pedal down to the floor. And there we go then, it's a good start for Marco Bischoff, already on the outside challenging the Lamborghini just behind, trying to find space. Walsingham takes the lead in towards turn 1, but Bischoff already on the attack as they head towards Beckers and Beckers now. And that Grippax Engineering car waiting, watching, trying to find opportunity, looking left, looking right as they head in towards the chicane for the very first time. But it's still the Ferrari that leads ahead of Bischoff as a helicopter does a little bit of a loop-de-loop, trying to get us on board the camera as they barrel their way down towards Stowe Corner for the very first time. It was a good run through there for Teemu Karppinen and a not so good run for Marco Bischoff, who finds himself under pressure, already having to defend. So is Inestrosa down the back straight. The Porsche is clearly suffering as they get to this next turn. The Grippax Engineering car towards the outside. Marco Bischoff squeezing on the exit. There wasn't contact there, just a bit of a wiggle on the cold tyres for Karppinen there. Can't get it done and stays P3. Inestrosa towards the outside with Pogarello down the inside in the Ferrari 296, trying to go for the switchback. Can't make it stick, but here comes De Campo. Hamilton style, trying to get the car back as they head through Club Corner. Yellow flag for the number 32 car. Excuse me, make that 22 of Fideli. And Huben still further down the order, down in P12, but he has made up 3 positions. Oh, that was scary for Pogorelov. Almost a big dramatic moment. Jardier sending one up the inside, taking no prisoners on the opening lap of this race, side by side in towards the loop. And Noah Reader will watch with a great deal of interest, see if he can make use. But look at the traction, the acceleration for the Porsche. What a move there for the number 3 car, slicing his way in towards P7. It will be a slight disadvantage, as we know, down this back stretch. But I think that Ferrari too far away, swapping of positions further down the order. Huben trying to make up another one towards P11 into Brooklyn's curve they go. He knows that this is an opportunity to maybe fight back in this championship, but he's going to have to take it with both hands if he is going to get anything over Korekis, who has made up just one sole position, as you'd expect, starting from the pit lane, of course. And unfortunately, we didn't see what happened to Fedeli in that opening lap, but they have managed to get through the lap mostly fairly cleanly. As you see, Walsingham already opening up almost a second around the outside. Vasta goes, that's very tricky, as the Ferrari of Simonov trying to get involved in this. So is the BMW off Penn and almost 4 wide towards Magnussen. Beckers side by side the Ferrari, now the BMW sensing an opportunity towards the outside. Penn goes, beautiful stuff from the finish driver in that number 14 car. Might want to make sure he gets it spot on the exit, because he could be a little bit compromised, but it looked like a good run. Look at Walsingham though, the lead that he has got, very nicely done from him on the opening portion of this lap. Bischoff fended off Karppinen, who is still very much in hot pursuit. Lerner P4, Inostroza P5, Pogorelov in pursuit still of the Porsche. And the Porsche is on the opening lap, other than Bischoff, not looking like they've perhaps got the strongest package to contend around here. Korekis, last week when we had him in the interview room, he felt confident going into this one. I mean, he hasn't got anything to lose. We'll have to keep an eye on his laps, but certainly right now looking like a quite titanic challenge, almost as much as this man, Nicholas Huben, who has already gained 4 positions on the opening lap, swapping further down the order between Drexler, Pierre Meyer through Abbey in towards Farm Curve now. Does the Audi set one up the inside like Jardier did? Tries to show the nose, but can't quite make it stick, although a little bit wide, a little bit of a dive from Thomas Brandt in the Porsche up ahead. But couldn't find opportunity either. But I tell you what, Walsingham absolutely stellar on the opening part of this race. 1.5 seconds now, the gap, but the front, Huben sends one up the inside. He likes that overtaking spot. Mercedes obviously working well there, and in the end, Solnev taking 2 losses through there, but Huben already up in towards the top 10 positions, and we will look to try to grab a replay of that one if I can fumble my way through the buttons. We'll try and see if we can have a look, because here we go. Mercedes using all of that straight line speed capability, looks towards that inside line, no defense applied from the Lamborghini, and it was a big dive from the white Ferrari of Philip Gross in the background. It was actual fact that it was was the one diving up the inside, but couldn't make it stick in the end as they all chop and change for position. But good stuff there from Huben as he tries to keep his championship hopes alive. Walsingham continuing to extend his advantage over Marco Bischoff, who extends the track entirely. Karppinen trying to see if he can launch an attack in towards Vale. I don't think it's going to happen just yet, but an uncharacteristic error from Bischoff, maybe a little bit out of desperation because of the pace right now of Walsingham. He looks good in qualifying, and right now 0.4 of a second last lap, faster than anybody else, and Vassner swapping positions with Zen there, but I don't think it's going to be over with just yet, because Penman hunting around in that BMW. See how do they fare through Abbey Curve. BMW planted, but a little bit understeery, and see that Ferrari in the rearview mirror hunting, trying to find opportunity. Does Simonov decide to send one up the inside? See, all very defensive from each and every one of them there. They're conscious of that move. Of course they would be. They're some of the best in the business. This is where we saw Huber making up most of his opportunities so far. Jardier trying to make a move very shortly onto Pogorelov as well for 6th place. So Jardier finding some good race pace in this Porsche by the looks of it. It's down in towards Luffield now. See if Penman can get the job done, but a little bit squirrely on the exit. In actual fact, could leave himself vulnerable to the 296 behind if he is not careful. But I think for the time being he will hold on to that. But you can see gap has certainly closed up between those two. Let's have a little bit of a look at Jardio, who's been pushing on. 57.5 for Jardio last time around, and it was pretty even actually for our fastest guys, because Walsingham, Karpinen, Jardio all 57.5 within a few hundreds of seconds. But I tell you what, the fastest car on circuit last time around was Timo Karpinen, unless Grant just correct us. Oh dear, yellow flag for Jan Drexler. Yellow flag for Jan Drexler through Magnus and Beckett. Something has happened there. You see, he was battling with the likes of Edverton and Pierre Meyer. I say that. Was there contact with Thomas Moran? We can see the gaps behind. Either that, or he may have lost it all on his own, because there's quite a margin between each of those cars. Let's see as they make their way through the first couple of apexes. Does the car just let go? It's a twitch and a bounce, and unfortunately in the end a spin. And those tyres are going to be rather grumpy, I think, by the time he gets going again, because they're dirty, and also they will be pretty burnt up from that slide, and they are not going to be very happy about that whatsoever. Meanwhile, Walsingham maintaining his 1.7 lead over Margot Bischoff, who is keeping Karpinen at bay for now. Although Karpinen must be set 3/10 up on his lap time. Out of these top three, he is certainly the one that is looking to find a little bit of pace right now in this Lamborghini. Is that car just starting to get dialed in a little bit more as time goes on? And in terms of the response in chat, that may well be the case. Actually, I may have to get back to that in just a minute, because Simonov versus Peninen going through Luffield there, and I think it was the number 21 car that got the move done. I don't think I can check on the replay though, because we've got some pretty close action when they next get to Stowe Corner. I haven't done the maths myself yet, but he may have a higher average points per race, but when it comes to drop scores later, when we get into these next couple of rounds, I'm not 100% certain that in terms of the overall results that Huben will still be in a leading position. And whilst his consistency has been very, very good in that Mercedes, it must be said, this is a rare occasion we're having to see him really trying to find his way up through the field, because he has been so much in prime position time after time. I think those drop scores may end up playing a little bit of havoc for his title hopes, but it'd be very interesting to see how things play by the end of the day, because we will then have a much better picture of what is going to happen going into the finale of all places over at Monza, which I think in more recent times may actually be quite a good circuit for that Mercedes. So who knows, maybe a race win will happen at the very tail end of the championship, and it could be a very crucial one of that. And with Korekis not really looking likely to improve his points tally during the course of today, as one of the other Mercedes has a little bit of a difficult time, a moment in towards Abbey Curve, I do believe, for Vasta, and that has given him a lot of headache right now, because number 14 of Pendon trying to see if he can go for the over and under, getting the power down out of Village and into Aintree. Excuse me, out of the loop. But we're going to have to keep an eye on a few battles here. Sosev looked like he might be able to make some things stick. He can't. What about Pendant? Unable to do so either. That Mercedes pretty quick in a straight line. I think partly the reason why Huben has had such good opportunities so far. 1.5 seconds between himself and Norida for the car that sits in P10. Lap times, though, were pretty similar. So pace advantage maybe starting to level out. The Mercedes does tend to take a little bit of extra wear out of its front tyres. Not so much as it used to. The air on board this car now is a lot better, so you don't have to rely quite so much on mechanical grip kind of tearing through the tyres as you may have previously done, as swapping of positions further down the order between Edverton and Pierre Meyer. Not sure if that happens through Copse Corner. Sometimes the overlay gets a little bit on the sensitive side as to whether or not there has been a move, but certainly is a battle that is continuing to heat up, as is this one. Four-way scrap for P5. It's led by Angel and Strozer in the Veloce Esports Porsche, of course the sister team to Yas Heat that has this man Jaroslav Honzik on that roster. But 4 tenths, 3 tenths between them. And see Morris Lerner not that far up the road either. Gap between your front two also now up to 2 seconds, with Carpenter again sustaining the pressure on Marco Bischoff, but 57.3 for Walsingham last time around, continuing to find pace even with the tyres dropping away as Grantas Korekis has made up a move as he continues to try and make his way through the field. Let's see if we can catch what happened here, as did been a yellow flag as well out for Edfordson. We'll have to see if we can catch that in a moment. 25 car, does he just lift off? And he does. So after all of that, unfortunately us missing out on the action with Edfordson. I shall see if I can get it in just a moment, as of course we know how that overtake played out. Well, I think there's your answer. It is unfortunately going to tail off the end of the replay there, but I don't think we need too much more of an explanation. A hop, a skip and a jump quite literally into the outside of the circuit, and unfortunately disrupting that car, I think just enough that they ended up dropping some positions in the end. You can see that when we look at this top portion of the leaderboard, Grantas Korekis is just sneaking his way on in 24th position, whilst his championship rival Nicholas Huben sits in P10. Timo Karppinen sustaining the pressure on Marco Bischoff. It was identical times between your front two, and a 57.5, a tenth and a half faster for Karppinen last time around. And compare that, of course, to the likes of Korekis, who hasn't been able to really unleash his full pace, I don't think. Of course, he would have had some free air out at the beginning, and I must admit the times weren't as stellar as you might admit, so it's a little bit of an odd one for the Lithuanian, but I'm sure, of course, he will continue to find pace, find time, trying to nurture those tyres during the stint. Looking at the weather, still 30 minutes of sunshine at the very least, so looking pretty good for a stable, dry race. Of course, we have had a few interesting ones this season when the conditions have been changing, but it does look like this one is predominantly going to stay as is. Jardier also trying to find a move. He's been hunting around the back of Pogorelov. It does look like he is the faster car of the pair, but the Porsche just not really in a position to be able to make a move as he continues to stare at the back of that number 23 car, who has done a fantastic job to get themselves in that position. So I'm sure that their LFM license will be rocketing its way up after this race if Alexander can look to keep this position. You see a little bit of a tighter line from Jardier, not having to use that runoff either. Number 23 has to be careful not to push their luck too hard with the track limits on the exit of Copse Corner. As Jardier, though, weaves that Porsche from side to side. Such good agility in that car. Sometimes almost a little bit too much for its own good. But when you're at this level, agility, downforce, outright grip, that is what you need. These cars can have their quirks, but drivers tend to be very good at adapting to them, and you can turn a quirk into an advantage, a little bit like running wide on the exit. Stowe and Jardier, all you can see, had about 2 looks at that one, trying to work out if a gap was going to open. Instead, though, he goes a little bit deep under brakes. He could be vulnerable to the 296 of Mattia De Campo that he overtook not too long ago. As Pogorelov says, thank you very much, get some breathing room for the first time. As Jardier finds his way through Abbey and in towards Farms Curve, and then hard on the brakes, of course, trying to pull that one up on the apex, but it doesn't look like De Campo is going to be able to do anything just yet. See what the likes of Soltnev is doing. Manuel Fuchs in that number 17 car behind for the, I think that's a little bit of a different livery combination for the black, white and green Porsche. But these three have stayed as they were for a little bit of a while now. We've had a few launches, a few attacks, primarily courtesy of Alexei trying to find his way through the number 16 of Philip Gross. But for the time being, it is not going to be good enough. Much like, as I think Kylo in the chat has very kindly been doing a little bit of calculations, And 10th place for Niklas Huben won't be enough in to get himself up into P1 in the standings, as Benny Witter, I'm not convinced he did actually swap positions there. I think these two so close on the circuit, as Thomas Morant was looking towards the inside, towards Max and Beckers there. And I'll tell you what, speaking of the devil, here he is, Grantis Korekkas, 57.9, as Benny Witter opens the door and a little bit more. And if he's not, if he has a little bit of luck, maybe for the first time in this race session, Korekkas very likely to get 2 cars in just as many corners, as he looks someone up the inside of Thomas Morant. And he does, you can see on board actually, that Morant does seem to have a little bit of damage, so maybe running somewhat wounded. But Korekkas gets himself up a position. Benny Witter rather optimistically ends up looking to find a gap but can't do so. And so they stay as they were. So I think in terms of net points positions, that 10th place for Niklas Huben definitely won't be enough to offset Grantis' current points tally. Where it gets interesting, and what we'll have a better understanding of at the end of this race, is that when you start to drop the 2 worst race results from these drivers, bearing in mind Niklas Huben already has a no-show, and this result today is likely to fall a little bit below the benchmark that he's often treated us to in terms of his performance so far this season. So whilst he may close the gap overall, I'm less convinced about whether he has furthered his position in terms of the championship. And that drop score, it can either go very much in your favour or it can go entirely against you, and it is a very frustrating beast. And over sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, both for spectators and drivers trying to follow what is the consequences of each of these positions in the championship. And when we do get to next week, have a little bit more of an understanding of where everybody sits in the championship, then we'll try to run through a little bit of additional pre-prepared maths to explain all of that. Battles still heating up as we make our way almost a third of the way through this race. Timo Karppinen hasn't been able to get a spot. As I looked away for just a moment, Eric Conrad managed to get a very nice exit out of the S's, trying to make it stick around the outside, clips the exit curb, and Jonathan Clifford left for dust there by Eric Conrad. Fantastic move between those two. I think that may deserve a little bit of a replay because I did miss the very beginning. So we'll go on board the BMW. You see that BMW, good straight line speed. And as they get towards Stoke Corner, a little bit of wheel banging down the backstretch, no one really wanting to give way to the other. Of course, Conrad wants to try to stick that position, and as a result, probably moved over a little bit more aggressively than he needed to, trying to discourage Jonathan and bring him out of the throttle, but I don't think clearly it was particularly effective. Meanwhile, up out the front, 2.5 second lead between Walsingham and Bischoff, and 57.9 for Walsingham, 58.3 for Marco Bischoff again. Karppinen able to find a couple of tenths, but just not quite in a position where he's been able to make an overtake. But as he follows through now in towards Maggots and Beckett, as pit window now opens, be surprised if we see anyone going for a move quite this soon, as Pogorelov actually gained a lot in towards the 5th place position of Innestroza. But I tell you what, this could be a golden opportunity for Karppinen. He shows a nose, but he couldn't quite find a way through. And in the end, he will continue to look at the rear diffuser of that Porsche. You see, Bischoff, he wasn't quite sure initially on the run down towards Vale if he could stay in his racing line or if he needed to go for a bit more of a defensive approach. Eventually concluded that he was alright. And look, there's your race leader. Almost 3 seconds the gap now, as Jarnier finds his way in a position to try to get the run over Pogorello. Vans appeared out of nowhere. The Ferrari must have made a mistake, surely, because they were applying the pressure for P5 now, dropping down towards P7. De Campo wants a piece of this. He saw what Jardier did earlier, thought he'd take a little bit of inspiration, almost sends one up the inside, but he can't quite make that one stick. Michael Frey and Grantis Correcas now swapping positions, and it's all kicking off in a matter of just a few moments. We will, though, try to catch exactly what played out there. Going to be a little bit of a long replay, but I think it's going to be worth it for the action. So here comes Jardier, making his way through Stowe. We saw the Ferrari go wide early on. It's not that that causes the error. It must be surely something with Inestrosa then, and you see he goes very deep under brakes, just about manages to pull it up in time. Jardier says thank you very much, through he goes, and then De Campo was watching this with a great deal of glee, wondering what opportunities he could end up finding. He almost managed to find one as we go through Abbey Curve. You can see the extra momentum that this latter 296 has, but in the end it wasn't enough to try to make it stick. I did actually go further back on the replay with that, but for some reason it actually ended up showing me the rest of it. So unfortunately we didn't quite get the complete story there, as into the pits comes Solstev and also Thomas Moran. I think both those cars a little bit on the wounded side. Meanwhile, closest gaps on circuit belong to Matty De Campo versus Pogorelov, whilst he has Noah Ida in, well, it was in hot pursuit, and there he is. Rejoining the pack after a small excursion into a nearby field. But how's a corner that I think we also saw Bischoff making a bit of a mistake. Now, of course, can make those mistakes for very different reasons. I think Pendon may have finally got the move done over Sasha Vassner. So we're trying to see if we can take a look through here. He got a very good exit for Pendon, almost made a little bit of contact. That would have been disastrous as they went through Chapel Curve. Now sending one up the inside, trying to see what he can do. Gets it nicely stopped through that part of the corner then, and in the end, very nicely put together from the Finnish driver. And this group just behind has very much bunched up as Eric Conrad, another one of the BMWs, trying to set himself up a good exit onto the backstretch. Can't make it stick. Another car into the pits lanes. We have BM Meyer. Fideli has gone to the pits as well. And then we've also got someone else that I think just re-emerged in the pits, but I've lost track of who that may have been. Unless that was Meyer, I'm not 100% certain. As, oh, there you go, Sasha Vassner starts coming into the pits, as does Correcas. He doesn't want to be held up any longer. He thinks 35 minutes left in this race to go is easily enough running for these tyres to get to the end. So he'll be hoping for a perfect pit stop. He needs it if he's going to make any more positions than where he is at the moment. Of course, championship points are decided a little bit differently to last season. So for the last few seasons, we have had a skill-based scoring system where, depending on the strength of the field, reflected how many points you would get. And that would all come down to the likes of your pace and some other aspects as well. But in general, we've ended up making our way over to a sort of more of a traditional fixed points system. So effectively, the scoring is pre-assigned to position, and then whatever position you end up finishing in a race, that you will end up getting. And it stops drivers from being punished so much in terms of maybe having a really good race in a very difficult field of cars and then not really getting the reward for it. Whereas now, if they enter if the platform brings them into the top tier, then they are just as much in it as everybody else, and we are getting a fantastic series of battles up and down the order in this race so far. 3.2 seconds now, the gap between your two drivers at the front of the field, with Carpenter having dropped back to about a second now, so not ideal for the Finnish driver whatsoever. As now Walsingham decides to come into the pits. Now that's a little bit of a surprise. Did not expect the race leader to maybe looking to do that so early. I mean, we are approaching the halfway mark, give or take, so it's not really likely to be too damaging to his current position. Of course, he does have extra time in hand, but maybe could have stayed out a bit longer. I think he was still pulling lap times. The other two didn't seem particularly interested in coming in for a stop, but maybe it's just purely because he is worried about Marco Bischoff, who now he has been able to have completely free track in front of him. Finds himself in the lead of this race, going for that overcut strategy now relative to our previous leader. 58.1 was his last lap. And trying to see his yellow flag. Oh dear! For Philip Grossen, who's gone well off on the exit of Stowe. Has seemingly got it going again. I've got a horrible impression that this could be a technical issue that has led to that one. It's not often something you would expect to see between two drivers. He is relatively by himself. And yeah, that'll do it. Oh dear, that's not what you want to see. Very unfortunate stuff there for the number 16 car. He has managed to get going, but that does look like that has been a complete wheel issue. And he now finds himself rolling again. And I think he has actually now come to a complete stop. Can he get out of the way? I'm trying to see whereabouts, how dangerous is that. Thankfully, he's quite well off the racing line. That Stowe corner, though, so you do sometimes see some side-by-side action through that part of the circuit. Though I think might hopefully be just about okay. There's a bit of an update elsewhere. We've got Inostroza, Jardier, Pogorelov. They've all come into the pits as well, seeing as they can do something to shuffle the order. But Bischoff, Karpinen and Lerner not deciding to do anything further. And, yeah, unfortunately, I think that is a car that has now disappeared from the session entirely. So big disappointment for Philip Gross in that number 16 car, who will DNF and finish just ahead of Antonio Fedeli. Other than the fact that I do believe that whilst Fedeli has gone back out on circuit, that Philip Gross has unfortunately left the server entirely. So we won't end up seeing any more from Philip for tonight's race, unfortunately. Let's see as Walsingham shuffles his way back up the order. Nicholas Huben also deciding to stay out. Maybe just looking to pit around the halfway mark. He knows that other drivers are going to try and find a way of improving, because it is a little bit tricky around here to find overtaking opportunities. So doing it in the pit lane does end up being a way the drivers will tend to look to prefer it. Jardier hasn't been able to jump Alexander in the pits, but we did see that, especially on fresh tyres initially, that Jardier's pace did seem very good, and he was able to extract more time in the car than the man that is currently facing ahead of him. They make the way down in towards the Vale chicane. Go on board briefly, actually, with Jardier. See if he can do anything about that Ferrari. Hear him getting the power down. No, Reader comes into the pit. So does Bischoff. So, of course, don't really have any sort of form of double stacking of pits in the world of ACC. And again, a bit of a lift off through Abbey. And who is that, like a spy? Ahead of me, that is Inostroza, who was at the lead of this queue, has managed to maintain that. And right now, this strategy for Jardier, it's difficult to tell how it's going to end up playing out. So whether or not the undercut is stronger, is the overcut stronger? Yellow flag for Benny Vitter, seemingly purely for just entering the pit lane, but we will end up double checking just to make sure that it wasn't particularly alarming. He kicked up about 3 pixels worth of grass, and oh dear, I think that's going to be a drive-through. If you have pretty well, whatever the equivalent to eagle eye is for the for your ears, that it did look to me like he was caught speeding Yellow flag is still out for Benny Vitter. So it's a little bit weird, but he definitely did, by the looks of it, speed in the pit. And that is going to be quite a hard-hitting penalty from the game. I imagine Matic De Campo looking one way, looking the other, trying to see if he can go around the outside of Noarida, seeing if he can make it stick. Noarida barely giving him room, but De Campo says, excuse me, I am here, and tries to then send one up the inside as they get towards Vale, and he does so very, very nicely. So good stuff from the Italian driver. Meanwhile, Carpenter finally comes into pits and sees this man go in towards the lead of this race. Has also just occurred to me that, of course, we have our wonderful, wonderful spreadsheet list as well. And we have a very hard-working, busy team of people here at LFM that's put a lot of their own free time into trying to see if we can have this fantastic clean racing that we are used to, and we can have it fairly, and also whenever things do go wrong, that hopefully we can minimize the chances of having a little bit of a reoccurrence. So we will have a look at the spreadsheet in just a moment and see what our stewards have been up to. They've been up to simultaneously a lot and nothing at the same time, because there's a lot of investigations but no further inquiry for each and every single one of them. As now looking back towards the front, Marco Bischoff, tight as you like between himself and Aidan Walsingham, barely came out in front of the Lamborghini. And I tell you what, the undercut strategy for the Porsche not really showing much in the way of an advantage. It's got pretty cozy, I think, between Huben and Sosnev as well. Further down the order, Bischoff, by the looks of it, has just about enough to fend off the Gripax engineering car, but he's got to make himself a more convincing gap than that to allow him to be able to cruise pretty calmly. Of course, we see Bischoff very calm and collected when he is under pressure. Of course, when it does go wrong, he's a man that's I think fair to say that he wears his heart on his sleeve. And very much like, of course, the likes of Jardine and many of these guys and many drivers in sim racing. And, I think sometimes people are a little bit, too critical to kind of judge about people's reaction. But this is a very, very passionate field of drivers who spend a lot of time trying to practice and get themselves sorted for this championship. And, of course, many other series as well. But in this championship, we have over 6,000 euros in total of prizes on offer. As Moritz Lerner, the last driver to come into the pits, does make his stops. We'll have to see where he filters out down to. But, of course, when you have a lot on the line... Oh, that was a late move from Simonov. I was about to say, when you have a lot on the line, you do sometimes let emotions get the better of you. And into Brooklands they go. And I'll tell you what, number 21 car of Simonov, certainly not allowing the number 18 of Zahenna in this Accelerate Porsche, or ATC RL. That's actually, I'll come back to that one. But very good racing between those two, but not quite a move being sorted just yet. Walsingham still leads there now by 5 seconds, 57.4 last lap around. Nicely done there from the British driver. As Teemu Karppinen in hot pursuit of Marco Bischoff, still gaining a couple of tenths down the start-finish straight, the back straight down towards Stowe Corner, but couldn't quite pull anything off as they get now towards the Vale chicane. Hunting around for an opportunity somewhere, it's just not presenting itself. Same goes for Jalier. Saw him flash through the screen in the background as he looks to try to hunt down the gap to Pogorelov in the number 23. Finds himself all over back of Inostroza. So a lot of fights inside these top 10, and drivers really trying to push one another to their absolute limits and see what performance they can gain from their cars. Where can they find the advantage? Will it be through the likes of this corner here into the loop where they may be able to do something. Simonov gaining in the toe of the BMW down the Hamilton straight. And through towards Village Corner. Couldn't quite make it stick. As in actual fact, they've got to be careful of Zahenda. Make sure he doesn't find an opportunity that ends up coming through. But for the time being, he will have to sit back and watch, much like a lot of the other drivers in this race. We haven't seen too much in the way of overtaking. So almost a little bit like Formula 1 in that regard. That it's not always the easiest track to overtake as, and I think partly as a result because there's not too many heavy braking zones. We have very fast series of corners here, and especially in a GT3 car where the braking distances are fairly long, so if you can brake slightly earlier or slightly later, it's fundamentally ultimately dominated by the braking distance anyway. And then in relative terms, that may gain you just a couple of meters or something like that, but it's definitely a very tricky business and a different series of challenges for these drivers to try to face in these GT3 cars. But one that, of course, being in the Pro Series, they are very, very good at trying to master. Almost a four-way fight once more as Granted Correcas lurking in the background, having made his way to P16 now for the number 1 car. So he's gained 8 positions, 11 positions in this race so far. 2 of them courtesy of retirements, or at least major incidents as well. As, of course, Fideli did have a rather torrid start to this race. Meanwhile, Pogorelov is still sustaining the pressure on Inostroza, trying to see what he can do in that car, trying to see where can he find that performance advantage over the Porsche. Typically, we're expecting it to be in terms of straight line speed, because it didn't seem fantastically strong through there, but also when it comes to high speed cornering, the 296 is the car that generally ends up reigning supreme in that regard. But then you get to these windier sections, the agility, the traction, the braking capability of the Porsche. It's a tricky one to handle, a tricky one to master. Maybe not quite as difficult as the previous generation. I think that, through all the comments that have been made about the 992, that fundamentally it's a Porsche that shares about 90% of its qualities with its predecessor, but also 10% over from somewhere else, and having found themselves in a position to maybe, that was a mistake, and you saw had to compromise the rest of the line for Pogorelov, and it's opened up by a couple of car lengths now. Jardier bringing De Campo along for good company as well. Hasn't been able to extend the advantage. There's also this little group further down. It's a little bit confusing. There is a different Ferrari there for the Motor Sharks team. Simonov right now in between Solstov and Zahentner in the battle for P13. As looking at our times, 57.5 for your race leader, 57.4, 57.6 for the likes of Lerner. See what things lie on this lap. It looks like it may have been a bit of a weak lap from Walsingham, and a very strong one from Karppinen, who is just about starting to get himself in prime position to once again strike for the opportunity to head himself in towards P2, but easier said than done without a shadow of a doubt. Nicholas Huben as well, crucially, found his way down to P11, so I'm not quite sure. It must have been Sosnev who maybe jumped him in the pits with a slightly alternative strategy, because Huben likes that overtaking spot previously, but the Ferrari, very quick car in a straight line, and maybe just taking a little bit more time and effort to try to line up a move for the Unicorns of Love Mercedes car. As he heads now through Woodcote, carrying all of that German momentum into Kopp's corner. Hear him down again, patient on the throttle before he starts to pick it up again. does give me the indication when I see that car going through that part of the circuit that it could maybe just do with a little bit more front-end grip in one form or another. Sasha Vassner and Nico Pennant extremely close on circuit. Nico maybe trying to find opportunity towards the inside of Magnus. That's not going to happen. So now he needs to try to find an opportunity somewhere else. In towards Beckett. Out into Chapel. And seeing if he can get some sort of run on the Mercedes that sits in front of him. Eric Conrad, meanwhile, is just sitting there rubbing his hands together, hoping that these two have a random punt moment in the race, which now, thinking about it, is largely very possible. But towards the outside, as I think Korekis may have made a move. We'll try and check in a moment, because Pennant launching one on the inside. It's all kicking off. Everyone's making a move on this lap. Pennant trying to set one up around the outside. Can't quite make it stick on Sasha Vassner this time. We'll use the grunt in that Mercedes to see what he can do, and he does keep the position for the time being. Nico Pennant, see that rear of the BMW bouncing up and down just a little bit, and a bit of a harsh defense over Eric Conrad as well. But manages to sustain the position. We'll all try to go back on the replay then and see. Grantis Korekis, how did he make this move over to Hentner? As there's already nearly a second between those cars. So did he just send one up the inside? He did, and oh dear, that's what happened. It was a 21 car. Oh, Simonov had got it all wrong. Managed to gather it all up. Good avoiding action from Zahenna. And Korekis, the wise experience. He may be fairly young, but certainly incredibly knowledgeable in the car. Especially feels very at home, I think, in that Porsche in particular. Able to find opportunity. And get himself now up in towards the top 15. And with Hooper only 5 positions up the road, this is definitely, I don't think, going to be a particularly game-changing championship. 4.2 seconds now, the gap between the lead and his battle for P2, who it does look like to some extent have been working together, but that margin now between Karppinen and Bischoff just getting a little bit more cozy, and I'm sure that Bischoff's starting to sweat a bit more as he looks in his rearview mirror. Karppinen got a good run through turn 1 and 2, but he's too far back to make a move in towards Farm Curve. But he's definitely feeling like he is in a good position at the moment. I don't think it was a very good exit for the Porsche just up ahead of him. I will have to hop back away for just a second because they were scrapping around this part of the lap last time around. But Nico Pennant this time seems to have got the move done, and they almost swing out of that train before they go in towards the next couple of turns. I think Nico, unless something dramatic happens between this group, that I think he will stay in that position for now. Karppinen applying that pressure to Bischoff then. Last lap around, 57.8 for your race leader, 58.0, 57.9, 57.6 for Moritz Lerner. And Grantis Korekis, 58.9, but guessing that must have been through some sort of traffic, as Inestrosa's gone off. Inestrosa's gone off at Copse Curve. Oh, I don't like the look of that rejoin. But no, Reader, I think it's just about managed to get around in time then. Let's see if we can catch what happened. Inestrosa was largely by himself. I have a horrible feeling, is this just going to be another example of the renowned Porsche tank slapper is not quite as prevalent as it once was? In towards, yep, just back end completely goes on him, and it did very well to even manage to hold on to the car, because that is not an easy feat in itself, but unfortunately did lose him 4 positions in the process. Meanwhile, checking back with some of our other scraps. Carpenter still only 3/10 away from Marco Bischoff. Jardier having got a free position from his teammate, kindly donated. Probably not purposely donated. Eric Conrad now trying to go around the outside of Sasha Vasselin. Mercedes really struggling for pace then, and it's a squeeze and a push on the exit. Stoke corner. Here comes Clifford around the outside. Maybe even the pair of them. Still trying to keep his foot in, but I don't think he's got the commitment on the outside. So he'll only get one position for his troubles. Eric Conrad also gets one, but unfortunately Sasha Vasselin, a big loser. Yellow flag now out for Solznev, and I think that was a wide moment through the exit of Farm Curve there. If I'm not mistaken, see, he was dipping a wheel in the gravel early on. White flag out for Moritz Lerner, but it looks pretty brief, so I think he may be all right. And as they go through the right-hander, okay, through there so far, my goodness, that was a pothole and a half. That's the number 28 car ended up coming across there. I can only presume that he may have caught one of the curves on that inside apex, or if he's dropped a wheel on the grass and suddenly sprung back across. I imagine it would have been much more terrifying instance inside the cockpit if it had been in pre-1.9 physics, where suspension would have been significantly less happy about doing something like that. But he does just about make it work. Jardier then still applying the pressure to Pogorelov and got a very good run through Magus and Beckett. I don't know if in this position it's going to be enough for the number 3 car to get something done, but it does very much look like he is the fastest of that pairing and even the trio, because he had to Campo applying the pressure not too long ago. He's already got away from him. As meanwhile, Koreka, Simonov, Solzov all starting to have a scrap of their own down towards the tail end of the top 15 through the first apex. Make that second. And then trying to use all that acceleration and flat 6 horsepower to close up to the back of Simonov. But those Ferraris, it's going to be difficult to pass in the 992. A little bit of a wiggle for Korekas. I don't know if there's something about that part of the circuit. Maybe there is something with that part of the circuit. We'll have to keep an eye out because it does look like it's a little bit on the dangerous side running through there. Because if even Korekas can have a small moment, admittedly, small moment, he was able to catch with what looked like relative ease on the outside. I imagine that there may have been some rather frantic hand-waving, both attached to the wheel and perhaps off it, during that moment as well, accompanied by maybe some audible frustration. But we don't have proximity chat here in ACC, although something that I can imagine being quite an interesting feature if it was ever added. But certainly if we did have it, it would have been very interesting to see what the conversation would have been, as Jardier, carrying amazing momentum on the exit of Copse, has found his way in towards P5. Then it's almost contact between the pair of them, and I desperately want to look back on the replay, but I don't think it's a wise idea for me to, because Jardier being hunted down by Pogorelov down this back straight. Pogorelov showing his nose, but by the looks of it, isn't going to have enough. Tries to see if he can carry speed in the Porsche around there, but I think the wealth of experience, the racecraft capability, the patience, and of course the big smile has managed to get Jardier through into P5 there. See whether or not he can do anything about closing down that gap. Meanwhile, Korekas finally makes his way through on Igor Simonov then for one of the Motorshots cars. So we'll have a look and see how that came to be, as looks like it was a pretty good run for Grantis Korekas, but the work was not done at this point. It was done a little bit later on, as Simonov made a mistake on the entry, completely missed their braking point, had to back well out of the throttle to make sure that they didn't end up doing something utterly awful. But in the end, Korekas able to get up into P14 and does also put himself just one extra position closer to Niklas Huben, and maybe even make that 2 in just a short while. So Niklas Huben really, he has shown the racecraft that we've expected from him so far this season because he just has been that good. But unfortunately, when it comes to outright pace, this circuit just really has not suited his car. Maybe Monza will be better, but it has been a little bit of Ferrari, Lamborghini and Porsche territory for today. As white flag again for Inestrosa. I'm not quite sure what that was for. As Solzev, and that's a big cutback from Manuel Fuchs on the exit of Copse Corner. I think he's got the run. Very nicely done through the first turn there. And the number 28, nothing that he could do about that one. Soltov coming under increasing pressure from Korekas now as well. See how much tighter to that inside line. He was able to keep it, of course. If you're not having to fight the car so hard to get it into these corners, you're preserving the tyres during that whole time as well. And that does really feel like what Korekas, who admittedly went on a fairly early pit stop, is really aiming to do. The race is absolutely blitzed on by less than 9 minutes to go on the clock. But we still have three-way fights for P6's two-way scrap. Realistically, a three-way scrap for P13. Excuse me, correction, the battle for P5 actually is a four-way fight. And then a couple of other smaller fights further down the order. But again, showing the here in LFM and the Pro Series by Case King that whatever position you are in a split, you will have fun and competitive racing. I think the only man that maybe hasn't quite had that today would be Aidan Walsingham, as he does now lead by over 4.5 seconds. He may have had a little bit of an insight into it, as there's a yellow flag out for a couple of cars. It's Vassner and Frey, who both seem to have come out of it pretty badly. It was Vassner in the Mercedes ahead of the Porsche. Let's see what happens when they make their way in towards Abbey and Farm. And it's just a complete slide. Oh dear, Michael Frey. I feel very sorry for that man, as you could see that there was just nothing that Vassar could do once that car gave it away underneath him. And then Michael Frey just couldn't quite pick a side to go to. It's very difficult in those situations. Unfortunately, found himself just kind of pointing straight at the Mercedes, and in the end, clattering that car and sending him around a little bit himself. So very unfortunate stuff there. Now back into the live picture. You see this four-way scrap behind Jardier, who has got a position done on the back of that mistake from Pogorelov, but hasn't really been able to escape out of it. Maybe that's partly due to the result of the poor straight line speed. It's difficult to tell. And then also further down the order, scrap still taking place involving Korekas, who, bear in mind, he started from the pit lane. Now, it must be said, you know, that was it's a non-enviable position at the best of times. Especially when you are then fighting for a championship, and he has fought very hard and only finds himself now 4 positions down. Oh dear, it's all kicked off in the midfield. De Campo's around, Pogorelov is around, no Reader, Inestrosa have all gone through. What on earth has happened there? Let's see if we can try to find out. So Inestrosa a little bit behind this group. Here's De Campo, big slide for the Porsche. It was just behind all of this. Pogorelov sending one up the inside. Almost has the nose chopped off the car. Goes to the outside. De Campo launches an attack. Has a little bit of a hop himself over sausage curb. Oh dear. We started going skateboarding on the exit there. I'm not sure if we did bottle floor damage in this game. I'm not sure it'll be a good one. No time to think though, because Grantis Korekas has made his move on Solsov, then, who immediately finds himself under pressure from the likes of Simonov and Zahedna. So Korekas up in towards P13. Yellow flag again for De Campo. We'll have to catch that one in a moment. He's lost a position to Pogorelov in the meantime. Looking at Korekas, so down the inside of Brooklyn's curve. And in the end, a pretty nice, easy move, although in the state of chaos, everything has suddenly descended into no move is an easy one. You have to hold your breath at every given moment. But nicely negotiated from the man that is in the hot seat to win this championship. And let's see if we can capture what on earth happened with Mattia De Campo then, because let's see. at this point, trying to work out. So he was still behind Agent Astroza, and Pogorelov, I think, was a bit further back. Now, it could have been... Did he just simply back off? And that he did. Wow. That is some great racing respect there between De Campo and Pogorelov. He maybe didn't quite time the run into Magnus and Beckers perfectly, because Nicholas Huber now sniffing around the back of him, but that was very nicely done from De Campo. We'll also actually have to have a look if we can find a moment to breathe. The launching around the outside. Oh my goodness, that's not going to go well, surely. Oh, that got very, very scary for a moment. The 18 sending it around the outside. The 21 trying to go back up the inside. And then Karekas find himself just charging off and trying to see if he can close down a position for P12. But that kicked off pretty quickly. White flag for Michael Frey. I think he may have had a moment through Abbey once more. But this is your closest fight on circuit. C, just looking at the stewarding sheet, there are some things going on here. Haven't got the approval that it's been sent out just yet, but I think there might be something on the way. We'll have to see. Certainly, there is a decision being made at the moment, having looked at some of those recent incidents, and there's the confirmation. So a 10-second time penalty for Matty De Campo. I'm sure they would have taken into consideration the fact that he gave back the position, but that was definitely a little bit of a desperate attempt, I think would be the way to describe it. Also, in the chat as well, I can see a couple of comments. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left in this race, and also maybe just a couple of moments to breathe and have a little bit of a look at what you guys have been talking about. Big slide for Zahenda through Stowe then, so that opens up that gap between himself and Simonov immediately. So we'll have a look at Clifford versus Conrad in the meantime. And I have to say applause with the analogy. Jardier swapping positions with Noah Reader, trying to get the car back now. So Noah Reader, I think, has made a surprise move through the loop. Jardier having none of it, though. Porsche versus Porsche drag race. These two have fought more than once in the past. Not so much this season. Very close on the entry towards Brooklyn. So who's going to be braver under braking? The number 3 car with that inside line just about covers off a position. And Jardier's P5 spot certainly now under threat, much like P12. We'll have to get back to the chat in just a moment because it's all kicking off again. Greca storing down the inside for Brooklands again. P12 now, and well, would you believe it, P11 is almost on the cards if he can have a stellar final lap. In actual fact, he should get 2 laps out of this one, if I'm not mistaken. Be pretty marginal, but he very well may well end up just a single position behind his championship rival. And that must be a pretty sinking feeling for Nicholas Huben to find that you're the man you are battling in the championship started from the pit lane, and he's only going to be about 7 seconds behind you by the time the race finishes. I mean, the Mercedes definitely, I don't think, a strong car for today, but has not gone the way that he would have wanted. You can see Correca, so he is definitely pushing as Noah Reader pushes a bit too hard and finds himself wandering off a little bit into Narnia there, but manages to bring it back. Lerner in the Lamborghini get himself into a good groove at the end of this race. Actual fact, fastest man on track by quite a big chunk. Walsingham lost half a second on the last lap to this Lamborghini, so maybe Maurice Lerner finding his feet as he goes and trying to see whether or not he can bring a podium position to his tally. And also, Carlo again has been very kindly doing some looking around in the results and everything. That, yeah, absolutely spot on. I think worst result of the season was Suzuka after getting that drive-through penalty for track limits, dropping him out of a podium chance. And that quite possibly that the points tally that he ends up getting from today will be better than that result. Whereas in terms of races that he has finished, today is by far the worst result for Nicholas Huben. You can see how marginal, though, it was with the time. Walsingham barely got across the line before that finished. Hopefully no one's had a miscalculation on fuel. I really hope I don't curse that. But of course that decision was made ages ago, so I can no longer be responsible for such a thing. But it does look like in the closing lap of this race, whilst we had a little bit of a brief lull at one point, now all of a sudden we've got battles for the podium places, the top 5, and they're all going to kick off once more. And for the final time, down towards Stowe Corner they go. Carpenter, he's got up the other Lamborghini that's been at the pointy end of the grid, pressuring him all the way. Bischoff's been able to escape. Big move around the outside and contact between Carpenter and Lerner. Lerner sent off onto the exit of the circuit. Manages to just about gather that one up. We'll briefly check it with Norita versus Jardier then to see if those two are going to swap around. I don't think so. So let's try and see if we can quickly grab a replay of what happened there between those two. You can see Lerner, he goes to the outside, switching over to the perspective of Carpenter. Big, oh, there was no contact. Excuse me, I take that back. That was a complete misjudgment on Moritz Lerner. The camera angle we had was very far away, and it was difficult to see. I assumed that there was contact on that right rear corner, but I was absolutely mistaken. So unfortunately, Lerner has just completely thrown his own opportunity away all by himself. Norita trying to find one, almost finding the rear of Jardier's Porsche in these closing stages. But Aidan Walsingham, it's been building up to this moment. He's had a few attempts at it before. It hasn't quite gone his way. And if my memory serves me correct, it's the first time that he is going to win in the Pro Series. Fantastic stuff for him to take a win here at Silverstone today in that 296. Marco Bischoff celebrates P2. Carpenter with that very, very tricky final fight with Lerner, who does just about hold on to P4 in the end. Takes the final podium spot. And Norita versus Jardier. Jardier just about fends off the other Kenny Kramer Racing Esports car to the line. And then Mattia De Campo tries again the pressure onto Pogarelov. At the end, of course, handed that position back. And Grantas Correcas, he got pretty close. It won't be good enough to get P11, but he must be a pretty, well, I imagine a combination of frustration but also a happy man in all of that, as some of our final drivers coming towards the line. Now Nico Pennon, the next of the bunch, flashing of the likes. Eric Conrad, as everyone celebrates, and Madge will start doing some big slides through this. Well, that's a way to slide the car around. Well, 360, and I'm sure it was entirely intentional as well in all of that. Car's already returning to the pit lane. Jan Drexler just finishing ahead of the likes of Thomas Morant, and then I think we have Edverton, the Dane. We haven't had too many Danish drivers, I don't think, in this championship. And Fideli, who of course got sent around at the beginning of this race, but did manage to fight his way back pretty nicely in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see if we can grab any interviews for today, as Aidan is actually waiting in the interview box. So we will look to bring him in just a moment. But we may see if we are going to organise a little bit of a joint interview over with our fellow parts of the team in the German broadcast side of things. So we shall quickly fire off a message and see what we are going to do.
I'm fine. And you? What a nice race. What a clean race. 3 minutes before the end, the first punishment, I think. So, what a race. A lot of trains, a lot of position changes. Grantas Caretskas with the bad luck. Yeah, I think there was everything in it in this race. How did you see it? Yeah.
In the chat, thank you very much to those in the chat. Unfortunately, I've been muted for some reason in the results section. I have no idea why, but thankfully we hadn't brought Aiden in yet, so at least it hasn't compromised his interview. But I think we'll look to do that now. Aiden, fantastic stuff from you, sir, today, taking a brilliant victory and pole position. So amazing stuff from you to bring that one home. You must be delighted with that one, especially at your home circuit course on the calendar.
Yeah, it was great. Everything went perfectly. It was very good qualifying, and pace was strong for the whole hour. So nothing to complain about.
Yeah, it just, it looked like from the start, qualifying, I mean, when that final lap came through and I could see the delta come through, it didn't also, I mean, there were occasions where it didn't look like it was maybe a perfect lap. I think there was a couple of points where maybe there was a tenth or so in it, but clearly that car was dialed in very, very nicely. And did you come into tonight thinking that you would be in a competitive position to take that victory? Or, was it a little bit of an unknown because we're still kind of getting used to where these new cars kind of sit in the pecking order from track to track?
I did have an understanding that the Ferrari is one of the top cars here. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, but obviously happy with where it is.
Yeah, I think the combination of high speed cornering capability and maybe the you don't really have to negotiate much in the way of curbs here, which whilst obviously since 1.9 isn't so much of a detrimental factor of certain cars, it's not quite the same crippling level of issue that we saw for the Ferraris in the past, but it is something that I think generally speaking still kind of tend to shy away from as such when it comes into overall kind of race performance. So it was really good to see that car really came alive under those circumstances. In the early stages, it looked like that maybe the likes of the Porsche and the Lamborghinis kind of would be able to sustain that pressure a bit more. Were you surprised that those cars kind of fell away from you, or were you just concentrating on doing your own thing and bringing it home?
I mean, the gap in the first stint was, like you said, it was a little bit closer, and they did manage to maintain it quite well. It was more so after Timu started fighting a bit more with Mavics at the start of the second stint after the pit stops. That's when I started to pull away a little bit, and I could control pace a little more safer. Given that I'd already had that, whatever it was, 3.5 second, 4 second gap, I could just relax a little bit better. And maintain the gap.
Yeah, it was a really nicely controlled race from you in the end with all of that one. I think also, thinking in terms of the championship, that this has come at a rather sort of pivotal time. Of course, we're going into the final race of the season next week. Drop scores are looking to be applied, but you currently sit 4th in the standings. And with the likes of, Nicholas Hoban, Grant Caracas, neither of them having the sort of best results, it may be a little bit of an outside shot potentially, but I think certainly closing up that gap to towards Mavics in P3 and getting yourself maybe into those top 3 positions, you may have just reignited those hopes just a little bit. So going into the final circuit will be at Monza for the finale of the season, if my memory serves me correct. So do you think the Ferrari is going to have the same sort of level of pace there, or are you a bit worried about maybe some of those other guys around you?
I won't say much because I'll jinx myself. I just hope it's a good race for me.
I think that's fair enough. It's always very difficult to judge from time to time with the pace, and of course we are still establishing these things. I had a couple of moments at the early stage of this race where I found that I was commentator cursing sort of every couple of minutes, so I decided to stop making predictions as well. So I don't blame you whatsoever with that one. But brilliant stuff from you tonight. Incredible performance. And any words from you, Björn or Marius?
No further questions. Just congratulations for your big performance. I think there was no doubt that you will win this race, and yeah, great performance. Congratulations, and yeah, see you next week on Monza.
Thank you.
Cheers, Aidan. Thanks for coming in. Best of luck next week as well.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. So, John, I think, yeah, Monza, the last race, will be pretty interesting. We will see just 80 points between Granters and Niklas Uben. Insane. 80 points just between them both. I think, yeah, this will be a hard beat final.
Yeah, it's really going down to the wire. It's been sort of a bit topsy-turvy at times, trying to understand kind of, how these things are, how everything's going to play into effect in the grand scheme of things. When we consider that Huben hasn't had a victory all season long,
yes,
and he's always just been there or thereabouts. Other than that single no-show. That he fundamentally, other than today was his one. I think he would consider a poor race. Not so much in terms of how he drove, but just the pace wasn't there. Unfortunately, I think the Mercedes just in general didn't really suit this circuit. But he's done incredibly well to constantly extract pace out of that car at other tracks. I think heading to Monza, the one thing we did see today was the Mercedes. It had good straight line speed. It opened up opportunities down towards Brooklands on more than one occasion, and we're heading to the 10th of speed. So it really is a circuit that's.
I have seen they changed it a little bit, and it might be interesting because the new cars are fast everywhere, and so we'll be close, I think. But yeah, maybe he will have a better shot in Monza than in Silverstone. That's correct.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one to balance, and the new cars definitely do look quicker. Also, I've been sort of doing some spying on how the new McLaren has been sort of getting on in recent days. We haven't been able to sort of test it and try it out in season 10 so far because it wasn't anyone's pick at the early stage of the season. But I'm already predicting that there's probably going to be a decent few of them by the time we get to season 11. But yeah, I think next week at Monza we're going to have a pretty special race on the cards.
Yes. We will see. I think there's anything for a big final. Just 80 points dividing them. Two different cars. A lot of opponents. Let's have a great race next week. But now let's have a great night at first. John, thank you for broadcasting it again in English. We will say goodbye and see you next week.
Yeah, hopefully, well, I'm sure we'll have a big sort of wrap up of the season next week. I'm looking forward to what the finale is going to bring. So be good to catch up. Be good to catch up with you both next week.
Yeah. Talking 10, 12 hours after the race about the season, the late night show. Season 10, the late night show, presented by your host John Watts.
Have we had a late joiner for an interview?
Yeah, but we will go to our studio.
Well, they disappeared anyway, so I think that answers that.
Magic. So, John, have a nice evening. I think we will talk afterwards, and hopefully, all the other guys from all countries, from all over the world. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned at LFM. See you next week.
Yeah, catch you guys soon. So, man, I put myself in. managed to end up in the wrong commentary box. That was exciting. So technical issues were relatively okay up until the last 5 minutes of the stream, because I managed to mute myself. I don't know how on earth I did that. Actual fact, I have a suspicion. Hang on. That was it. It was because I typed a message, and unfortunately I have a hotkey on my keyboard that I forgot about, muting my mic, but that was rather unfortunate. And also, just to add to the slightly confusing matter of things, it seems that the results overlay, I'm trying to get it refreshed, it got a little bit stuck when I brought it up last time. Hopefully it works this time. So Walsingham takes victory today with Bischoff and Karpinen rounding out the podium, and then Lerner, Honzig, Ida, Inostroza, Pogorelov, Huben, Fuchs, Korekas, De Campo, Solsnev, Soltov, and Simonov rounding out the top 15. Zahedna, Pendon, Conrad, Clifford, Frey, Vassner, Drexler, Morant, Edverson, Fideli, Meyer, Gross, and Vitter rounding out the rest of your order from today's action. It was 60 minutes of glorious stuff around such a fantastic circuit, and will we expect anything else from one of the most legendary circuits on the planet? I don't think so. When you combine that with the Pro Series and sort of quality that we are used to of racing from these guys every single week, that very much this is what we have come to learn and expect from the Pro Series. So great to see providing action as it always does. So I can say, next week we will be going to Monza for the grand finale, where it looks like we really do have a championship fight on our hands. It's very close between Huben and Korekas at the top of the standings. Very small margins between those two after today's race. So we will be looking forward to that. Will we have a new person that takes a victory, puts a cat amongst the pigeons for our championship contenders, or will it be Huben that maybe finally takes a race victory to try to cement a championship? We'll have to wait and see. So if you have enjoyed tonight's race, and do consider subscribing to the channel as it continues to grow and we look to make our way towards the end of Season 10, and stay tuned for all of that action next week, of course, as well as all the many other exciting things we have coming up in the future as well. And if you have looked at the racing and fancy having a bit of a go at it yourself, then do also head to the LFM website at lowfuelmotorsport.com. Get yourself signed up and get yourself a license. You can work your way through the ranks and compete for some amazing prizes. Of course, Aidan Walsingham will have gone away with a €100 voucher from today, provided by, if I remember rightly, Ducky, as we've been alternating each week between Glorious and Ducky products. But it is Ducky this week, and those prizes brought to you, much with the rest of the series, by Case King. And like I say, some very, very big prizes up for grabs elsewhere in this championship when we reach its conclusion. So do look to get involved in some of that racing. And if maybe GT3 isn't quite for you, there are more categories for ACC. There's an Endurance Championship that takes place on Sundays, and of course RFAX 2 on the platform as well for all the likes of touring cars, single-seaters, and also the Sports Car Championship as well, where you can have things like prototypes running around the Nordschleife if you really want quite the challenge for sim racing. So there's so much to choose from and to enjoy. So definitely take a look at that. And if you just want to be part of this amazing growing community, which has a absolutely mega amount of users now, as I look to double check, 96,500 to be precise, then also you can look to join the Discord server and see what the community we have over there is like. And I'll tell you now, it's a very loving, friendly one that welcomes everyone, whether you are passionate about sim racing or motorsport or anything in between. You are all welcome to join that indeed. So look forward to seeing as many of you next week as possible for the grand finale of Season 10, where it all goes down to the wire between Huben and Korekas. But for tonight then, it's goodbye.